Now, let's talk a little bit about the SSC, Science and Statistical Committee, and we'll get into that right now. So, all about the Science and Statistical Committee. They advise the council on technical and scientific aspects of the fishery. They review the stock assessments through the CDAR process and the interim analysis, and they provide recommendations on stock status, and they make recommendations on the OFL, which is the overfishing limit, and the ABC. So, that's what they do. They are very smart people. The SSC is made up of very, very intelligent people, scientists, and most of their conversations really, really struggle to follow. They are exceptionally smart people. They are appointed by the Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Council, and they are made up of a chair, vice chair, special SSCs, and special subcommittees of the SSC. And they are making recommendations by consensus, and they vote on different measures. And they are managed by and governed by the national standards. You can see the Florida fishermen in that photo. That's me right there, actually. And that's us doing a mangrove snapper assessment, fisheries independent data collection, back when I was much younger. So the MSA, Magnuson-Stevens Act, is what governs the whole process, I said before. So the SSC develops recommendations for the OFL and the ABC. So this is really important here. This is the whole process. Science gives us the overfishing limit. That's the high level. So let's use easy math. Let's say they say the OFL is 100 fish. Then they buffer that down. The SSC says, well, there's 100 fish, but there's some high PSEs or standard errors, percent standard errors. There's some uncertainty in the science. So we're going to buffer your OFL down to an ABC, or allowable biological catch. So that OFL gets buffered down a little bit. So those 100 fish, let's put a 20% buffer on them. Let's call the ABC 80 fish. Now the council gets that ABC. They can set their ACL, or allowable catch limit. The management now kicks in. They can set that catch limit right at the ABC, and they're really confident we can manage really well. We're going to set our ABC or our ACL equal to the ABC. No buffer for management uncertainty, which is very rare. Most of the time, there's a little buffer between the ACL, or allowable catch limit, and the ABC. So your 100 pounds OFL gets buffered down for scientific uncertainty to the ABC. So now let's say it's 20%. Let's say our ABC is 80%. Now the council looks at that and says, well, we're not 100% sure we're going to be able to manage this to the number. We're going to be a little bit more conservative. We're going to set a little buffer, maybe 10%, which is pretty common. So now you have that 100 pounds is buffered down for scientific uncertainty to the ABC. It's 80 pounds. Now it's buffered down another 10%. Now we're going to call it 70 pounds for the ACL. Then the council can also set an ACT, which is an allowable catch target, which is again buffered down for management uncertainty. So they can set another buffer in there, which they do this for red snapper. Our ACT is buffered down by 9% for our federal for-hire fleet. So we're essentially leaving 30–40% of the fish in the water because of management and scientific uncertainty. And we can reduce those certain uncertainties and reduce the buffers by electronic daily reporting. Something we work towards in the charter fleet and headboat fleet. It would be very hard to do in the recreational fleet because there's too many people and it's very expensive. It was a $19 million program for the 1,300 charter boats in the Gulf, and that was only 3 years, $19 million. And they just shot it all up and threw it away after years of work. To essentially, what it would do is it would remove the management buffer immediately, because there is no management uncertainty anymore because real-time electronic reporting. And then over time, it would reduce the scientific uncertainty. So now you're increasing 30–40% your catch limits. Pretty impressive. Reducing uncertainty allows more fish to be harvested. MSA dictates how that all works. And they evaluate, the SSC evaluates stock status, whether the fish is overfished, undergoing overfishing, or rebuilding. So they look at the stock assessment information, and the SSC is the group that determines, based on all that scientific information, what's happening to the stock. Then they tell the council, and then the council has to manage on it based on MSA, or the Magnuson-Stevens Act we talked about earlier. There's different examples of the SSC reviews, and they can get pretty complicated. But long story short, the big thing that you need to remember is the SSC is the bridge from the science to the management, because they take all the science, they interpret what's going on, and then they tell the council, hey, this is what's going on, here's your ABC. And from there, the council can decide to set their ACL equal to the ABC. They can buffer it down a little bit because they might not be too sure about the science and the information from the SSC, or maybe the SSC didn't all agree. Maybe there was some contention around it. They might buffer that ACL down a little bit from the ABC that the SSC started. Then they can add an ACT buffer for management uncertainty. Now, this is all done at the Southeast Regional Office. Remember, the Gulf Council doesn't do the numbers. They're not the ones in charge of MREP. They're also not the ones in charge of rulemaking. They're not the ones who have the final say. The Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Council is an advisement body, an advisory body to NOAA fisheries.